Two spouses carried the bones in the wooden coffin out to bask in the light. The yang energy gradually increased, and the dew on the grass was drying up. I was a paper figure, and even with. I suggested that we come back at night. But the couple insisted on keeping me there, feeling that my presence made them safer, so I could only go back with them. They invited me to their home as a guest. The luxurious house of the Liu family was extremely extravagant, and there were 2 servants in the house, making their life very comfortable. I told Liu Tonfat to continue pretending to be in a coma, because it was still uncertain who was acting from the darkness. It wasn't until we reached the second-floor bedroom that the 2 finally relaxed. Coincidentally, Secretary Chow's phone call came in. Wang Fuang Mai put it on speaker, and a clear, experienced voice came from the other end. Sister Wang, I've contacted a health recovery center here. When shall we take Director Liu over? Wang Fuang Mai looked at me, and I subtly shook my head at her, and she immediately understood. My friend has referred a doctor to me who is said to be very skilled. Now, you should fly to Shanghai to help us find a short-term rental. Secretary Chow paused, seeming hesitant. Sister Wang, can we book a hotel online first? I have some matters to take care of at home. As soon as Wang Fuang Mai heard that she wanted to return, she immediately looked at me. Whatever it is can wait. No one is more important than my husband. If something happens to my husband, you'll be unemployed, understood? Wang Fuang Mai scolded Secretary Chow and then hung up the phone. As soon as the call ended, she turned to me impatiently. Miss Tun, today you said that the energy of the grave has been disrupted, which means the person who moved the grave will also face misfortune. Did Secretary Chow encounter some misfortune, which is why she hurried back? Before I could say anything, Liu Tonfat interrupted. I told you it's not Secretary Chow. The coffin clearly contains a man. Secretary Chow's father is still very much alive. Seeing Liu Tonfat defending Secretary Chow made Wang Fuang Mai's anger flare up immediately. If her father is still alive, it can't be her grandfather, uncle, or some other relative. If we talk about who around here has had the best luck, it must be her. A fresh university graduate who was promoted to director's secretary in less than 2 years. In half a year, she bought a car and a house. Where did she get all that money from? Seeing that the workers had finished, I said to them, go home and burn the clothes you're wearing immediately. For the next 7 days, do not leave your house, especially at night. Go quickly. The workers ran away in fear, not even daring to ask for their wages. Once the workers were gone, Wang Fuang Mai trembled uncontrollably. I could only try to comfort her. Don't be afraid. The paper figure I gave you will protect you. Liu Tonfat also lost the confidence he had just moments ago. What about me? Why didn't you give me a paper figure? You're already missing parts of your soul. You're practically like a dead person. The vengeful spirits won't come after you. However, the energy in this grave, which belonged to Old Man Liu, has now been completely disrupted. Initially, the energy that belonged to you hadn't completely dissipated, but it wasn't very obvious. Now that it's entirely gone, you might experience bad luck for a while. Business will be difficult, and in your personal life, you'll easily get into arguments. You need to be cautious. Once we find Old Man Liu's remains, these issues will naturally disappear in 3 months. This energy has been disrupted, and the descendants of this set of bones will also face misfortune. I haven't studied Mao Shan for long, so I'm not very skilled in formations, but since this energy has dissipated, it's likely that they already know. This was my first time encountering such a difficult problem to solve. While studying Mao Shan with my grandfather, I was only interested in the miraculous techniques of talismans and paper, connecting yin and yang, and I just wanted to accumulate some merit. It seems that I should learn more in the future. In a short period, the energy of the grave had completely vanished. The scenery in the mountains also began to change. In the middle of summer, the trees around the grave started shedding their dry leaves, looking very desolate. Mr. Liu, I originally wanted to use the energy of the grave to restore your soul, and then use magic to stabilize it, but now that the energy has dissipated, you can only rely on yourself. I cut a paper figure, drew a talisman on it, and told him to hold it tightly. Mr. Liu, when night falls, your soul will leave your body again. Hold this paper figure tightly and try to concentrate on it until you can clearly see where you are. At that point, I will call your soul back, and you must tell me where it went. Liu Tonfat nodded with a pale face. In Liu Tonfat's eyes, there was a clear look of chaos. I see a girl like Secretary Chow is not easy to come by, so I gave her a few small investments. Those are just normal dividends she receives. Wang Fuangmai refused to back down. There are several secretaries in the company with the director. Why did you promote her and not anyone else? Lu Tonfat lay on the bed, turned around, and closed his eyes. I can't explain it to you. I just recovered from being ill, and now you're making me angry. Wang Fuangmai's anger immediately fizzled out. She must have felt that Lu Tonfat was sick and that it wasn't right to argue with him. As dusk settled, I advised Lu Tonfat to concentrate on the paper figure. The last rays of sunlight disappeared on the horizon, and Lu Tonfat slowly closed his eyes as if he were sleeping. I placed the incense bowl in the eastern position. I lit 3 sticks of incense. As the 3 sticks silently burned down, I signaled for Wang Fuangmai to help Lu Tonfat sit up and lit his chin as I had done with the paper figure before. After a few minutes, he began to flail his arms, opened his eyes wide, and shouted loudly, "Don't come over here. Ah, help. Don't come over here." Wang Fuangmai hurriedly held his arms tightly. "Old Lu, it's me, old Lu." Lu Tonfat struggled for a moment, finally managing to focus his eyes on the person in front of him. Returning to familiar surroundings, Lu Tonfat stared blankly for a long time before bursting into tears. "Stop crying. What did you see? Where did you go?" Lu Tonfat was in tears, his hands and feet clumsy like a child. I saw a female ghost. She said she wanted to take me away, I furrowed my brow. Do you remember where you went? Lu Tonfat's eyes sparkled. After hesitating for a long time, he finally spoke. It was the Hung Hai apartment complex. The Hung Hai apartment complex? Wang Fuangmai suddenly realized. The Hung Hai apartment complex isn't Secretary Chow's home? I told you that this wench is trouble, yet you keep defending her. As she spoke, Wang Fuangmai angrily hit Lu Tonfat a few times. This is not the time to argue. Let's hurry to the Hung Hai apartment complex and retrieve Mr. Lu's birth information. The Hung Hai apartment complex is located in the west of the city and is somewhat dilapidated. Climbing up to the 6th floor, Wang Fuangmai and Lu Tonfat were already panting. This was Secretary Chow's previous home. She bought a new house later, so she doesn't live here anymore, Wang Fuangmai explained. Just as she was about to knock on the door, I raised my hand to interrupt. Using the scissors I always carry, I knocked lightly, and the door opened. A strong smell of decay and rot flooded the room. I raised my hand to turn on the wall switch. As the light flickered on, the couple behind me screamed in fright. A red coffin was placed in the middle of the living room, and liquid was seeping from the gaps in the coffin, presumably fluid from the decomposing corpse. The coffin was wrapped in thick red string, and many paper charms were stuck to the string. Lu Tonfat, scared out of his wits, stammered, "This is the place." Wang Fuangmai took one look and didn't dare to look again. I handed the scissors to Lu Tonfat. You need to cut the red string and open the coffin. Inside, there should be a red piece of paper. It's a marriage certificate. Use these scissors to retrieve your birth information and give it to me. Lu Tonfat looked at me in disbelief and didn't move. Do you still want to live? He hesitated a few times, trembling as he took the scissors from my hand and boldly walked over. The scissors were very sharp and quickly cut through all the red string. Pushing the coffin required a fair amount of strength. Just as the coffin was pushed open, a pungent odor filled the air, causing Lu Tonfat to immediately gag. Quickly, I urged him. He wiped his mouth, glanced inside the coffin, and then looked away in fear. He quickly retrieved the red paper, cut a piece, and ran toward me. What are you all doing here? A familiar voice called from behind. I turned around to see a slender girl standing at the staircase. Wang Fuangmai's face was flushed from gagging, but she quickly stepped forward and slapped the woman. Chow Vu Tin, you wretched girl. We treated you well, why would you want to harm us like this? Chow Vu Tin was presumably the Secretary Chow I had heard on the phone. She held her face and burst into tears. Sister Wang, she stammered, making Wang Fuangmai even more convinced that she was responsible. When something happened to my family, you, a mere secretary, lose all sense of propriety. I'll tell you, even if everyone in my family dies, you won't get a single dime. You've been fired now. I even want to sue you. Sue you to the ground. Wang Fong, my rain slaps down on Chow Vu Tin like bamboo leaves in a storm, and the girl didn't explain, only holding her face and crying quietly. Lu Ton Fat staggered over after throwing up. Vu Tin, look at the mess you've made. Lu Ton Fat dragged Chow Vu Tin toward the door. Chow Vu Tin looked around the room, struggling not to scream. Ah, Director Lu, I didn't do this. I haven't lived here for a long time. A neighbor called to tell me there was a smell coming from the house, so I rushed back. Wang Fong my scolded from behind. You're worse than a thief trying to deny it. My forehead twitched, and I hurriedly interrupted them. It wasn't her. Wang Fong my looked puzzled. The coffin has been in her house. Is there still a mistake? I took out the fidgeting paper figure from my bag to check. Someone is disturbing the grave. We need to go there immediately. Time was running out, and Lu Ton Fat had regained his spirit, pressing the accelerator to the maximum, driving into the mountains at the fastest speed. While driving, he seemed to remember something. I just recalled. Last year, when we broke ground at the construction site, we dug up a coffin. At that time, we were worried that news would leak out and we wouldn't be able to sell the house for a good price, so we kept it hidden. I remember that after the coffin, we found a chest of books, all kinds of feng shui books. I thought they were unlucky, so I told you to handle them. Didn't you burn them? Chow Vu Tin cried as she replied. At that time, I planned to burn them, but my boyfriend said those books were antiques and could be sold for money. I thought it would be a pity to burn them, so I gave them to him. Wang Fong my immediately scolded Chow Vu Tin, continuing until we arrived at the gravesite. Before we even got close to the grave, we could see the flames from a distance. Smoke wafted up, making the forest look like it was shrouded in fog. In the mist, a man was burning paper and mumbling something. As we approached, we could see better. The man was tying red strings around 7 trees near the grave, while standing within them. 7 stars gathering chi formation. When I stopped, Lu Ton Fat also didn't dare to move forward. Ms. Tun, what is the 7 stars gathering chi formation? The 7 stars gathering chi formation uses the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to nourish the grave. Initially, it takes 3 months to gather chi, but using this formation, it can be done in 1 night. Once buried this way, there will be no need for further chi nourishment. This 7 stars gathering chi formation had long been lost, so it was surprising that someone still knew how to use it. I took out the scissors and cut the red strings. The strings fell to the ground, and the bells tied to them jingled. Who is it? The man, seeing the formation being disrupted, quickly stood up. Chow Vu Tin stepped forward from behind. Songzhe, what are you doing? The pine branches in the fire crackled, and the red flames illuminated Songzhe's face, making him look somewhat fierce. You know, the ancients said, destiny is determined by heaven. You dug up someone else's ancestor's grave and secretly tried to change your luck like this. It's against heaven's will. Songzhe frowned, gripping the shovel tightly. So it's you who have disrupted my formation. Songzhe glared at Lu Ton Fat behind him. How are you still alive? He then pulled out a book from beside him and started flipping through it. That can't be 7 times 749 days. You should have died a long time ago. I scoffed. Mr. Song, that book of yours must be ancient. The ancients didn't calculate time accurately. There's a difference compared to now. The 49 days you mentioned is actually half a day short. Who is the corpse in the house? Why are you digging up someone else's grave? You better explain clearly. Songzhe let out a sneer. Even if you report me to the police, I'm not afraid. Do you have any evidence to prove that this grave was dug by me? What was my motive for digging it? Are you going to tell the police that I know magic and wanted to change my luck? The police will think you're a mental patient and take you away. Moreover, that house belongs to Chow Vu Tin. What's inside has nothing to do with me. I've already broken up with Chow Vu Tin. Wang Fong I couldn't help but be angry. You broke up with her, so why do you still want to help her harm us? Songzhe coldly looked at Chow Vu Tin, then shifted his gaze to Lu Ton Fat, the malice in his eyes unable to be suppressed. Why am I doing this? Why don't you ask your good husband? Lu Ton Fat. Your father's bones have long been thrown into the river for the fish to eat. You deserve to have your ancestor's grave dug up. Lu Ton Fat pointed at Songzhe. You. Songzhe spoke fiercely. What do you mean you? All of this is something that wealthy, heartless people like you must endure. Saying this, He turned to Wang Fengmai. Your good husband brought Chao Vu Tin to his side under the guise of hiring an assistant. Chao Vu Tin graduated from a third-rate school. What could she do as an assistant? He was just interested in her looks and youth. Third-rate schools. Attending such schools in China is often viewed as simply buying a diploma because the tuition is typically very high, leading to many places not recognizing these degrees in hiring processes. Chao Vu Tin's face turned pale in an instant, and she couldn't stop the tears from flowing. Song Zhe was even less reserved. Chao Vu Tin, why are you crying? Are you innocent? You told me that Lu Tonfat forced you. He could force you once, but could he force you a second time? Or did you want to sleep with him on your own? He bought you a house, bought you a car, and then you suddenly said you wanted to break up with me. You looked down on me for being poor, for lacking ability, so you became his mistress, a woman who destroys other people's families. Don't you care about your face? Lu Tonfat's face flushed with anger. Shut up. Song Zhe spread his hands. Why should I shut up? Don't you like young, beautiful girls? I've prepared a bride for you, what do you think? A beautiful bride. I picked her from several hospitals and secretly took her out. She just died and is still fresh. Do you like it? After saying this, he laughed loudly as if he were electric. This girl, why would you want to help someone as morally corrupt as Lu Tonfat? Are you also his mistress? Let me tell you, his ancestral grave has been completely destroyed by me. Lu Tonfat won't be able to borrow from it to change his fortune. As if to confirm that what he said was true, the ground trembled as his words ended, and a dragon's roar, faint yet resonant, echoed throughout the mountains. Soon after, the previously empty grave filled with water in an instant, as if the sea was rising. I suddenly realized. This is not the 7 stars gathering chi formation, this is the 7 stars gathering killing formation. This mountain is originally a dragon vein, and this grave is a scale on the dragon's body. What he is doing is equivalent to pulling out dragon scales, and what flows under the ground is dragon blood. Although it won't harm the entire dragon vein, this grave has undoubtedly been destroyed. Song Zhe's voice was filled with interest. You know quite a bit. However, I'm not afraid if you report me to the police. You have no evidence to prove that all of this is legitimate. The police won't take action. Even if I'm arrested at most, it'll just be for a dispute over romantic relationships, and I'll be released in a few days. He picked up the pile of books. In these books, there are many ways to punish people. Lu Tonfat, you slept with my woman, just wait for me to make you suffer until you die. I took out a censer and pulled out 3 incense sticks to light them. Under the gaze of the divine beings above and the Lord of Death below, I invoke the spirits, come forth and make a judgment. The smoke from the incense rose straight down to the ground. Song Zhe looked around several times and then began flipping through his books. I want to see what trick you're trying to pull. He kept flipping through the books in his hands, sweating profusely but unable to find out what I was doing. Stop looking. Not everyone has the ability to light incense like I do. To be honest, it's nothing. My grandfather had great merits when he was alive. After death, he became the master of the ledger in the underworld, managing and dispatching the spirits. I'm lighting the incense to ask my grandfather to send the spirits to help me. Your tattered books are nothing compared to that. I'm telling you to explain yourself, not to report to the police. These techniques of yours go against the heavenly principles. The ones you need to explain to are the spirits. Upon hearing my words, Song Zhe appeared relaxed. So what if it's the spirits? The books say that if a person's lifespan has not yet ended, even the king of hell cannot force me away. I focused on the incense, which was about to burn out, and patiently explained to him. Secret techniques that have been passed down for thousands of years, but very few people use them. That's because going against heaven comes at a huge price. Do the books tell you about moving graves to change fortunes, but not the cost the practitioner has to pay? When you gather killing energy and break the grave, the evil energy harms your merits. Without merits to protect your body, your lifespan will also be reduced. Song Zhe, outwardly you blame Chao Vu Tin for cheating with Lu Tonfat, but in reality it's because of you. You've changed this grave for a year. At that time, you didn't even know Lu Tonfat and Chao Vu Tin were together, right? As I spoke, the 3 incense sticks burned out. A cold wind blew, and 2 spirits holding chains appeared in front of me. I stepped forward to pay my respects. Sorry to trouble you, great spirits. This person has carelessly used dark arts, destroying the feng shui of this place. His skills are shallow, he has merely pulled a dragon's scale. If he drains the dragon's blood completely, it will cause the dragon vein to shatter, and the dragon will ascend, resulting in eternal unrest here. The ghostly officials flipped through the ledger in their hands. Song Zhe looked around. Who are you talking to? What trick are you trying to pull? The spirits frowned as they saw the sins clearly marked in the ledger. The two spirits rattled their chains, and Song Zhe took a step back. Since his lifespan was not yet exhausted, he could not see the spirits. Perhaps because his sins were too heavy, causing his lifespan to shorten, he immediately saw the spirits. Who are you? Why are you here? I know magic. I'll set up a spell to summon the Een spirits. You little ghosts better be careful of me capturing you. Lu Tonfat and Wang Fuangmai could not see the two spirits and were scared, standing behind me. Ko Tun, what happened? I said nothing and watched as the spirits bound Song Zhe with chains. Unable to move, Song Zhe kept screaming. I hurriedly called the spirits. Great brothers, we can't handle this body, please take him away. The spirits swung their chains. Okay. After that, Song Zhe staggered down the mountain, as if he had lost his soul. Throughout the process, Chao Vu Tin was so scared that she couldn't utter a word. It wasn't until Song Zhe disappeared from sight that she turned to me. Where did Song Zhe go? What will happen to him? I glanced at Chao Vu Tin. Song Zhe's lifespan has ended, and his soul has been taken by the Lord of Death. As for the body, it may be missing, it may fall into the river, or it may. Before I could finish, there was a loud crash from below on the winding mountain road. There was a sound of collision and something heavy falling to the ground. Song Zhe must have died in a car accident. At night, the forest was eerily silent. Thus, the earlier crash was even more pronounced. Very clearly, Chao Vu Tin had heard it. She sat down on the ground, and after a few minutes of being in a daze, she began to cry. Wang Fuangmai, who had always been strong, was also frightened into silence. Lu Tonfat, being a man, was slightly braver. After a moment, he walked over and asked, Ko Tun, where is my father's bone now? I pointed to the small river below the grave. Perhaps it's down there. Find a grave for the old man Lu again. This grave can no longer be used. Lu Tonfat repeatedly nodded in agreement. After thinking for a moment, I reminded him a few things. I know it's not easy for you to accumulate wealth, but you must understand that only by letting go can you gain. Being charitable will benefit you. You think that you and Chao Vu Tin were just casual, it's merely giving her some money. But in this world, not a single raindrop falls in the wrong place, and every person you meet is not by chance. You in particular, are a victim of a love curse. Those affected by this curse not only lose wealth but can suffer more serious consequences, leading to family ruin. Your wife has deep feelings for you. When you are down, she doesn't abandon you. Even if you become rich, you should not disappoint her. If you report finding the coffin and hand over the ancient books you found, Song Zhe will not have the chance to obtain those books. If you don't entangle with Chao Vu Tin, you won't be retaliated against by Song Zhe. You must remember, everything you are suffering is retribution. Lu Tonfat's face turned red from what I said, and he lowered his head in silence. After everything was settled, I also left. As I walked to the middle of the mountain, I turned to look back. A purple malevolent aura still lingered on Lu Tonfat's forehead. This was the love curse that had not yet dissipated. And within Chao Vu Tin, who was crying on the ground, there was already another life. The entanglement between them would not end, but this matter no longer concerned me.